Ashes of the Soul Forged, Chapter 7. Chapter 7. Divine Judgment. As observed by me, Vaelis of the Quiet Accord. The morning they left Korthak's throne, I watched Edrin pause at the fortress gate. His hand rested on the weathered stone, the same gesture Brand had made 1,000 times, checking the solidity of his work before moving on. But where Brand had touched stone with a creator's pride, Edrin touched it with a survivor's farewell. 3 weeks to iron fast. 3 weeks until the hammer would be ready. 3 weeks carrying the weight of 21 souls and the knowledge of what awaited them at journey's end. Behind him, the fortress stood silent, its dark stones absorbing the morning light as they always had. The unbound, Kes, Theron and Vel, had not come to see them off. They didn't do farewells. They simply returned to their eternal vigil, waiting for the next souls who would choose neither divine master. "Ready?" Mira asked, adjusting the straps of her pack. The morning light caught the silver threads in her hair, making her look older than she had in the cavern's darkness. She'd been quieter since revealing the truth about the Aurelion's harvest, as if speaking the secret aloud had cost her something she could never reclaim. Marcus was already 10 paces down the road, his restored arm moving with unconscious ease as he checked his weapons. Recovery, I was learning, wore many faces. Some of them looked almost like the person who'd been lost. "We should move," Edrin said. His voice carried the weight of all 21 souls, but the chaos had settled into something closer to harmony. Not peace. I doubted he would ever know peace again, but at least the screaming had stopped. The third way, the voluntary cooperation they'd achieved, held firm. For now, they walked east, following roads that had seen better centuries. The war between Silver Shore and Dragon's Bend had touched even these remote paths. Merchant traffic had dwindled, village markets stood half empty, and the few travellers they passed moved with the wariness of people who'd learned that strangers brought trouble more often than trade. I followed as I always did, anchored in the space between spaces where divine observers dwelt. But something had changed during their time at Korthak's throne. The Unbound had reminded me that observation itself was a choice, that witnessing without acting made one complicit in whatever unfolded. The crisis I'd felt building since Oakhaven deepened with every step they took toward Ironfast. First. The first 2 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. Edrin walked in the centre, sorrow's edge wrapped but present at his hip. The sword remained unusually quiet, its red gem pulsing with a slow, contemplative rhythm. It was learning, I realised. The weapon that Nethrix had designed to consume and corrupt was adapting to its bearer's unexpected evolution. Marcus ranged ahead and to the sides, his experience as a soldier manifesting in unconscious tactics. He checked sight lines, noted defensible positions, marked escape routes. Grief's echo sang its sorrowful song, but he'd learned to let the voices take turns rather than drowning in their collective weight. Recovery had given him back pieces of who he'd been before the weapon claimed him. Mira brought up the rear, her attention split between the road behind and the 2 men ahead. She'd been teaching them as they walked, not soul management this time, but practical matters. How to read the land for pursuit, how to identify Aurelion agents by the particular way they moved, the subtle signs of divine blessing in mortal flesh, how to disappear into crowds without appearing to hide. "They'll come for us," she'd said on the second afternoon, when they'd stopped to refill water skins at a stream. "Not immediately, but they're mobilizing. The 7th Choir doesn't deploy for minor threats. How do you know they're coming? Edrin had asked. She'd touched the crown-shaped scar that only I and others touched by divinity could see. Because I can still feel them, all of them, the connection they forged when they tried to cleanse me. It never fully broke. I catch echoes, fragments of their thoughts when they're focused intensely enough. Can they feel you? Not anymore. I learned to shield myself, but it's like standing next to a bonfire. You might not see it, but you feel the heat. Her expression had darkened, and right now, that bonfire is getting very, very hot. Inside Edrin's head, the 21 souls had stirred at this news. I could feel their reaction rippling through the harmony they'd built. Not panic, but heightened alertness. They'd all died violently. They recognized the feeling of being hunted. Rawn, ever the pragmatist, had been the first to voice what they all thought. We should prepare for battle, not run from it, but choose the ground. Halvan Ma had disagreed. We're not ready for the full choir. Better to evade, survive, reach the hammer. The Dreamwalker had suggested something else entirely. I could enter their dreams, sow confusion, buy us time. But it was one of the harvesters who'd made the most tactical observation. They'll try to separate us. Divine forces always target the support structure first. The woman is their highest priority. She knows their secrets. Edrin had shared this with Mira and Marcus that evening, when they'd made camp in a hollow between hills. They're worried about you, he'd said to Mira. The souls think the Aurelion will try to capture you specifically. They're right. Mira had poked at their small fire, watching sparks spiral into the darkening sky. I'm the proof of their lie, a truth seeker who discovered the truth and lived to tell it. They can't allow that to stand. Then we protect you, Marcus had said simply. You protect the mission. You get Edrin to iron fast, to the hammer. That's what matters. She'd looked at both of them with an expression I recognized, the face of someone preparing for sacrifice. If they take me, you keep going. Promise me that. Mira, promise me Edrin, because if it comes to a choice between my life and the completion of what we've started, you cannot hesitate. Her voice had been steel wrapped in kindness. The third way you've discovered, the proof that souls can cooperate without divine mediation, that's bigger than any one person. Even me. Neither man had promised, but I'd seen them exchange a glance that spoke volumes. They would try to save her if it came to that. They would probably fail, and the trying would cost them dearly. On the third morning, everything changed. They'd broken camp early, hoping to cover good ground before the heat of the day set in. The road here wound through a stretch of old forest, oak and elm, that had stood for centuries, their branches creating a canopy that turned noon to twilight. Marcus stopped walking. His hand went to his sword, not drawing, just touching the hilt in a gesture that made Edrin and Mira instantly alert. We're being followed, he said quietly. Edrin closed his eyes. I watched the 21 souls within him focus, their awareness extending through sorrow's edge into the fabric of the world around them. The sword had been teaching him this. How to feel the disturbances in reality, the places where violence had left scars. 3 miles back, Edrin confirmed, moving fast, professional, and... His eyes snapped open, pupils dilating as another awareness crashed through him. Above, something in the clouds. Mira's jaw tightened. She knew, as I did, what moved through clouds with divine purpose. How many? I can't tell. The sword says, Edrin's hand went to the wrapped blade at his side. Even shrouded, sorrow's edge radiated hunger. The weapon sensed what was coming and it was excited. Too many. It's practically singing. In the Hall of Accordance, I felt the moment shift. Aurelion's attention, which had been diffused across 1,000 concerns, suddenly focused like a burning lens. She'd been waiting for this, for the perfect moment to deploy her full response. And she'd chosen well. The old forest limited sight lines prevented easy escape. The ground forces would drive them forward into whatever waited in the sky. A closing net, not a hunt. We run, Mira decided. The terrain ahead opens up, if we can reach the serpent spine ridge before they close the gap. They'll catch us before nightfall, Marcus interrupted. He'd fought alongside divine forces during the border wars. He knew their capabilities. They're not tracking us. They know exactly where we are. This is mathematical. They've calculated our position, our speed, our destination. We're not being hunted. We're being collected. The cold pragmatism in his voice made even Mira pause. She looked at Edrin, and I saw her calculating. 3 weeks to Ironfast when they'd left Cothac's throne. Perhaps 2.5 remaining. Bran's hammer, waiting. The only weapon that might balance the scale sorrow's edge had tipped. We need those weeks, she said finally, whatever it takes. They ran, too. I'd seen divine forces mobilise before. I'd witnessed the 7th Choir deploy against apocalyptic threats, reality tears, demonic incursions, mortal kingdoms that stumbled onto powers beyond their comprehension. But I'd never seen them move with this particular intensity. 43 agents, the entire choir. For 3 mortals who discovered a better way. They descended from my vantage in the space between spaces, and even I, who had served alongside these beings for centuries uncounted, felt a moment of terrible awe. 43 points of golden light cutting through the grey afternoon sky, moving with the precision of a master smith's hammer strikes. At their head flew Celestine, who had been my sister in service before her ascension to Battlesat. Her armour was woven from solidified hymns, each piece a prayer given physical form. Her spear was a crystallized supplication to Aurelion's glory, sharp enough to cut the space between thoughts. She'd trained for 3 centuries to channel divine will into physical force, to be the Accord's answer to violence that mere words could not address. The ground forces spread out in practiced formation. I recognized most of them. Seraphel, whose laughter I'd once shared over the absurdity of mortal courtship rituals. Now she moved with grim purpose, twin blades blessed to cut through any defence mortal hands might raise. Mordain, who had saved my existence during the fracture wars when reality itself had threatened to tear. His hammer could shatter stone with a touch, and his presence dampened magical abilities in a 30-foot radius. Ilara, the truth seeker who trained Mira before Mira discovered the truth that could not be reconciled with faith. Her eyes could read intention from a glance, peel away lies like layers of rotted cloth. And 39 others, each blessed, each deadly, each absolutely certain in their righteousness. They were here to kill 3 people who had committed no crime, except finding proof that divine mediation might not be necessary. Below, on the forest road, Edrin and his companions ran. But running, I could see, was mathematical. The ground forces were faster, tireless, coordinated by a shared divine purpose. The aerial forces could strike from angles impossible to defend. The forest that had seemed like cover was actually a trap. Limited sight lines meant limited warning. Mira saw it first. She'd been scanning the sky through gaps in the canopy, and when the golden lights broke through the cloud cover in their full glory, I watched all colour drain from her face. "No," she whispered, then louder, urgent. "Edrin, Marcus, run, now. Don't look back, don't argue, just run." "What is it?" Edrin asked, even as he began to move. "The seventh choir." Mira's voice shook, the first time I'd heard true fear from her. "They've sent everyone, every single agent." The weight of that statement hit them like a physical blow. Marcus grabbed Edrin's arm, physically pulling him forward. "How far to cover?" 2 miles to the ridgeline, Mira said. "If we can reach the old watchtowers, defensive positions, stone that might hold against blessed weapons." The first spear of golden light struck the ground 30 feet ahead of them. The impact was not an explosion. It was reality restructuring itself around divine certitude. The road cratered. Trees bent away from the impact point. The shockwave threw all 3 mortals backward in a tumble of limbs and desperate rolling. Edrin came up first, combat instincts honed by 21 different fighting styles. Sorrow's edge was half drawn, its red gem blazing with anticipation. The sword shrieked with joy. 21 voices suddenly sharp with eagerness. Finally, it seemed to say, worthy opponents. A feast fit for what I've become. "Don't," Mira gasped, struggling to her feet. Blood ran from her nose where the concussive force had burst vessels. "Edrin, you can't fight them all. You have to—" "Surrender the abomination." Celestine's voice rang like a bell across the broken road. She descended slowly, wings of pure radiance spread wide, each feather a perfect prayer made manifest. "Surrender the soul thief, and you may yet be granted mercy." Around her, the ground forces emerged from the forest in perfect formation. 39 divine agents encircling the 3 mortals with the precision of a noose drawing tight. Edrin's hand tightened on Sorrow's edge. I felt the 21 souls within him surge, not toward violence, but toward unity. They remembered Celestine's type, divine warriors who spoke of mercy while burning villages to ashes, agents of order who killed in the name of peace and called it necessary. Rawn's voice harsh with memory. I've heard that speech before, right before they executed my entire squad for sedition. Halvanmar, bitter, mercy. They always call it mercy when they make examples. The dreamwalker, alien but knowing. She believes what she says. That's what makes her dangerous. "We're not surrendering anything," Edrin said, and his voice carried harmonics that made even Celestine pause. 21 souls speaking in unison, mortal and defiant, and absolutely certain in their conviction. "We're going to Ironfast. You can let us pass, or you can try to stop us." "There is no try," Celestine replied. "Only inevitability. The Accord has made its judgment. You are an abomination, a corruption of the divine order. Your continued existence threatens the very foundations of cosmic law." "Then cosmic law needs better foundations," Edrin shot back. Celestine's expression didn't change. "So be it," she attacked. 3. Later, when I replayed this moment in my memory, and I would replay it countless times, searching for the moment where I might have intervened, where my choice to observe rather than act sealed fates I could never undo, I would marvel at how quickly everything dissolved into chaos. Celestine's opening strike should have ended the battle before it began. 3 centuries of divine training focused into a single perfect thrust. The spear moved faster than mortal eyes could track, guided by certainty that knew no doubt, blessed by power that brooked no resistance. But Edrin moved with the coordination of 21 combat veterans. Rorna's brutality shaped the angle. Voss's precision timed the step. The harvester's alien geometry calculated vectors that shouldn't exist. The Dreamwalker bent probability at its edges. Halvan Mar's desperate will to survive poured through every muscle. And Edrin himself, the boy with the blacksmith's hands, brought them all together into a single fluid motion. Sorrow's edge met the spear in a shower of sparks that burned both gold and black. The impact shattered the road beneath them, sent shock waves through the fabric of reality itself. I felt it in the Hall of Accordance, saw Aurelion's eyes widen with something that might have been surprise or might have been recognition. The boy with the blacksmith's hands had just matched a battle saint's opening strike. "Impossible," Celestine breathed. "Apparently not," Edrin replied and pressed the attack. What followed was not a duel. It was a symphony of violence conducted by 22 voices, 21 souls and one mortal boy, moving as a single deadly instrument. Edrin flowed through combat forms that blended and shifted. No single style dominant, adapting to Celestine's centuries of training with the collective knowledge of lives ended by violence. But he was holding back. I could see it in the way Sorrow's edge screamed frustration, in the moments where killing strikes became disabling blows, in the sword's constant pressure to feed, to consume, to add a 44th soul to its collection. "No," Edrin told it silently. "We don't need to kill her. Just survive." Marcus engaged the ground forces with desperate efficiency. He knew he was buying seconds, not victory, but he bought them anyway. Grief's echo sang its mournful song as he fought. 43 sorrows wielded against 43 divine agents, a grim synchronicity that would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. He fought like water, finding cracks in stone. Aurelion's agents were powerful, blessed, trained to channel divine authority, but they'd never face someone who'd spent 2 years as a walking memorial to despair. Marcus knew every way violence could break a person. He used that knowledge now, targeting not bodies, but certainties. A blow to the knee that made a Harmony warden question whether their blessing would hold. A feint that drew a truth seeker into overcommitting, making them doubt their own tactical judgment. Death by 1,000 small uncertainties, each one carefully placed to accumulate into paralysis. He couldn't win, but he could make them remember the fight. And Mira stood very still at the edge of the battle, watching the faces of the truth seekers as they advanced. I saw the moment she recognized one of them, saw her lips form a name I couldn't hear over the clash of steel and hymn and desperate prayer. The true seeker, Ilara, whose kind eyes I remembered from countless councils, saw her too. "Mira Threnhold," Ilara said. There was no surprise in her voice, only confirmation of suspicions held for years. "So the rumours were true. You did survive your censure." Mira's response was barely a whisper. "Ilara, please. They're not what you think. If you would just—" "I think," Ilara interrupted, her tone gentle despite the words, "that you have been compromised by prolonged exposure to an abomination. I think you require cleansing, and I think I can offer you one final chance to remember your oaths." She extended her hand. The gesture was almost tender. "Tell us where the blacksmith's hammer is being forged. Tell us the location of the smith who dares help this creature. Do this, and you may yet be forgiven." The boy and the soldier will die, but you could come home, Mira. Back to the order, back to the light, back to those who love you still. I watched Mira look at Edrin, who was currently fighting for his life against a being who'd trained for 3 centuries to kill exactly his type of threat. His movements were brilliant, beautiful even, a perfect synthesis of 21 different martial traditions. But brilliance couldn't overcome inevitability. Celestine was faster, stronger, tireless. She would grind him down through attrition if nothing changed. I watched Mira look at Marcus, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts as he held back forces that should have overwhelmed him in seconds. His endurance was remarkable, his tactical mind still sharp despite exhaustion. But even he couldn't hold forever. The divine agents were beginning to coordinate, to work in synchronized pairs that exploited every gap in his defense. I watched her look at the hammer that wasn't there, perhaps 2.5 weeks away, in a forge at Ironfast, being shaped by hands that remembered Brand's teachings, the only weapon that might give them a chance against this kind of overwhelming force. She looked back at Ilara. "Tell me truthfully," Mira said, her voice steady, despite the tears running down her face. "If I give you that information, if I betray them, will you actually let them live?" Ilara's expression flickered. Just for a moment, I saw the crack in her certainty. The Accord's judgment is, will you let them live? No, Ilara admitted quietly. The abomination must be cleansed. The traitor soldier must face Aurelion's justice. I'm sorry, Mira. I can only save you. Mira nodded. Then my answer is no. Ilara's eyes widened. You would die for them? For this creature? I would die for the truth. Mira straightened her spine, and in that moment she looked exactly like the truth-seeker she'd once been. The truth that mortals don't need divine mediation to find meaning. The truth that the Accord harvests souls to sustain itself. The truth that everything we were taught was a lie, designed to make us complicit in our own exploitation. She stepped forward, walking directly into Ilara's space. And I would die to protect the people who had the courage to prove that truth. What happened next, I witnessed with the peculiar horror of seeing an inevitability unfold while being powerless to change it. Mira didn't run. She didn't fight. She simply surrendered. Walked into the waiting arms of her former colleague, even as Edrin screamed her name, and Marcus tried to break away from his own battle to reach her. Ilara's hand touched Mira's temple, and I saw the binding take hold. Divine script written directly onto her consciousness, turning her from person to prisoner in the space of a heartbeat. Her eyes went blank, her body slack. In seconds she was transformed from Mira Threnhold, teacher, guide, keeper of dangerous truths, into an empty vessel, waiting to be filled with divine compliance. Mira. Edrin's anguish resonated through all 21 souls. The harmony they'd built fractured, not broken, but strained by an emotional weight it had never been designed to carry. Every soul within him felt the loss, screamed at the injustice, demanded retribution. Kill them all, Rawn snarled. Consume them. Add their strength to ours. No, Halvan Mar countered. That's what they want. Don't give them the excuse. She chose this, the Dreamwalker observed with alien calm. Honour her choice. But honour felt like cowardice in the face of loss. Edrin's concentration wavered for just an instant. Celestine's spear found the opening. She drove it toward Edrin's heart with the certainty of divine judgment. 3 centuries of training, making the strike as inevitable as sunrise. Sorrow's edge moved on its own. The blade caught the spear's shaft and redirected it, not with Edrin's skill, but with the sword's own terrible intelligence. In that moment of Edrin's distraction, the weapon had seized enough control to preserve its vessel's life. "No bargain yet made," the sword whispered through Edrin's lips, his voice distorted by the weapon's presence. "This one still has uses." The 21 souls rallied in that instant, not because they wanted to fight, though several did, but because they understood that stopping now meant Edrin's death and their own final dissolution. They poured their knowledge, their instincts, their desperate will to survive into his exhausted body. Edrin fought like a force of nature, like 21 people moving in perfect synchronization. He shadow-stepped through Celestine's guard, using techniques the Dreamwalker knew. He struck from angles that shouldn't exist, exploiting geometric impossibilities the Harvesters understood. He bled time itself to create openings where none should be, bending reality at its edges the way Sorrow's edge had taught him. But there were 43 divine agents, and he was one mortal boy carrying 21 ghosts. "Fall back!" Marcus's roar cut through the battle like a cleaver through meat. The soldier had fought his way to a position where he could see the full scope of their situation. They were surrounded, outmatched, seconds from complete annihilation. Edrin hesitated. Mira was only 30 feet away, unconscious in Ilara's arms, being carried toward the clouds where the golden lights waited like carrion birds. "Edrin, now!" Marcus grabbed his shoulder, physical contact breaking through the combat haze. Blood ran down the soldier's face from a dozen cuts. His left arm hung at a strange angle, but his eyes were clear, his voice absolute. "We lose her or we lose everything. You have to choose." The choice took everything Edrin had. I watched him turn away from Mira, the woman who'd saved him, guided him, believed in him when he was nothing but a traumatized boy with a cursed blade. I watched him run, even as Sorrow's edge screamed betrayal, and the 21 souls wept with his grief. Marcus covered their retreat, fighting with the terrible knowledge that they were abandoning someone who'd never abandoned them. He took wounds that should have dropped him, pushed past pain that should have paralyzed him, burned through reserves he didn't have. When they finally broke free of the encirclement, crashing into the forest's deeper shadows, both men were weeping. Behind them, Celestine didn't pursue. The 7th Choir had achieved their primary objective. They'd captured a former truth-seeker who possessed intimate knowledge of the abomination's capabilities, his allies, his destination, his weaknesses. As for the boy with the stolen souls, he would break eventually. They always did. Grief was a more reliable weapon than any spear. 4. They didn't stop running until dawn. Marcus finally called a halt when Edrin stumbled for the 3rd time in as many minutes, his coordination breaking down from exhaustion and grief. They'd put perhaps 15 miles between themselves and the battlefield. Nowhere near enough if the 7th Choir decided to pursue, but all their bodies could manage. "Here," Marcus said, guiding Edrin toward a cluster of rocks that offered minimal shelter from the wind and even less from watching eyes. "We rest, 2 hours no more." Edrin collapsed without argument, his back against stone, Sorrow's edge still clutched in white-knuckled hands. The sword pulsed with frustrated energy, angry at being denied its full feast of divine flesh. But for once, the weapon's complaints were the quietest voices in Edrin's head. The 21 souls were screaming, not with the mindless chaos of before, not with the cacophony that had nearly driven him mad in those first terrible weeks after Oakhaven. This was different. This was unified anguish. Every soul within him, from Rorn the bandit to the dreamwalker, from Halvan Mar to the harvesters, all of them mourning. They'd loved her too. The realization hit Edrin like a physical blow. In the weeks of travelling with Mira, learning from her, watching her gentle guidance transform his relationship with the voices in his head. The souls had grown attached. She'd treated them not as curses or burdens or tools, but as people. Damaged, fragmented people, yes, but people nonetheless. And now she was gone. "We have to go back," Edrin heard himself say. The words came from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond reason. "We have to—" No, Marcus's voice was flat, final. He sat across from Edrin, methodically checking his wounds with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd survived battlefields before. A deep cut across his left forearm that was still weeping blood. Burns on his hands from deflecting blessed fire. A purple bruise spreading across his ribs where a Harmony Warden staff had connected. His left shoulder sat at an odd angle, dislocated probably, though he hadn't complained. "We don't. She's alive." Marcus looked up, and there was something terrible in his eyes. The knowledge of someone who'd made similar choices, who'd abandoned friends to save a mission, who'd carried the weight of those decisions for years. They won't kill her, not immediately. She's too valuable. They'll interrogate her, try to extract information about us, about the hammer, about where we're going. Then we have time. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. Marcus's tone brooked no argument. He'd shifted from companion to commander, his military training reasserting itself in crisis. They know we're heading to Ironfast now, or they will once they question her. Every hour we waste is an hour they use to prepare, to set traps, to fortify whatever they're planning. He stood with visible effort, wincing at movement, and came to kneel in front of Edrin. "Listen to me. I know what you're feeling. Every one of those 43 sorrows I carry. Most of them are people I couldn't save, people I left behind because I had to make the same choice you just made." "It doesn't feel like a choice," Edrin whispered. Inside him, the 21 voices howled their agreement. "It feels like surrender. It is surrender of one thing to preserve another." Marcus's hand gripped Edrin's shoulder, his voice gentling slightly. Mira chose to walk into their hands. She made that decision to buy us time, to protect the mission. If we throw that away, if we go charging back into 43 divine agents with no plan and no backup, we make her sacrifice meaningless. "So what do we do?" The question came from both Edrin and the chorus within him. "We just abandon her. We get the hammer." Marcus's voice was granite again. "We complete the journey to Ironfast. We claim your father's weapon, and then, only then, we have a chance. Right now you're powerful. With the hammer, you'll be balanced. The sword and the hammer together, creation and destruction in equilibrium. They might give us the edge we need to actually mount a rescue." Logic. Cold, merciless logic. Every word Marcus spoke made sense, and Edrin hated him for it. But the 21 souls, for all their anguish, seemed to understand. Slowly, gradually, their screaming shifted. Became something else. A different kind of consensus. Rorn, who'd spent his mortal life making brutal calculations, was the first to voice it. Revenge requires patience. "We'll get her, Bok. But not like this." The harvesters, creatures of tactical precision. This is not retreat. This is strategic repositioning. The hammer changes all equations. Even Halvan Mar, who'd been a farmer before violence consumed him, sometimes you have to let the field lie fallow before you can plant again. We honour her by surviving, by becoming strong enough to save her. The Dreamwalker, always the most alien, contributed its own perspective. She walks in their dreams now. I can reach her there, keep her from being fully consumed, buy us the time we need. One by one, the 21 souls shifted from grief to purpose. It wasn't acceptance. None of them accepted Mira's capture as permanent. But it was acknowledgement that throwing themselves uselessly at 43 divine agents wouldn't save her. It would just add more corpses to the pile. Edrin felt the shift like a physical weight settling on his shoulders. The voices were still there, still loud, still demanding. But they'd found a common goal again. Not harmony exactly, but close enough. "How long to iron fast?" he asked finally, his voice raw. 2 weeks if we push hard. Maybe 10 days if we're willing to risk the straight roads instead of staying hidden. Marcus stood, offering his hand to pull Edrin up. The hammer should be finished by the time we arrive. Calum promised 3 weeks from the day Valis brought him the metal. That was, 22 days ago now? 22 days, 3 weeks minus a day. The same timeline that now measured Mira's captivity. Edrin wondered if that was coincidence or some cruel cosmic symmetry. "Then we take the straight roads," Edrin said, getting to his feet. His legs trembled, but they held. No more hiding. If they're already tracking us, if Mira's going to be interrogated, stealth doesn't matter anymore. Speed does. Marcus nodded approval. Good. That's thinking like a soldier rather than a victim. He began gathering their minimal supplies, moving stiffly, but with purpose. But we'll need food, water, and we'll need to avoid populated areas where possible. The Aurelion will have eyes everywhere now. They set out again as the sun crested the horizon, burning away morning mist. 2 figures on an empty road, moving with the single-minded purpose of those who'd lost something precious and refused to lose anything more. I watched them go, still anchored to my position between spaces. My sisters in the 7th choir had returned to the Hall of Accordance with their prize. Aurelion was even now beginning Mira's interrogation, not with crude torture, but with divine truth magic that would strip away every secret, every memory, every piece of knowledge Mira had tried so hard to protect. I could intervene. I had the power to disrupt the interrogation, to perhaps even free Mira before the process went too far. But doing so would reveal me as a traitor to the Accord, would mark me as an enemy of everything I'd served for countless centuries. More importantly, it might not save her. It might just get us both killed and accomplish nothing except warning the Accord that I'd finally chosen a side. So I made the same choice Edrin had made. I chose the mission over the person. I chose the possibility of future intervention over certain present destruction. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. The crisis I'd felt building since Oakhaven deepened into something like certainty. When the time came, and it would come soon, I would intervene. Not as divine observer, but as participant. Not according to the Accord's restrictions, but according to my own conscience. But that time was not yet. So I followed Edrin and Marcus, and I watched, and I waited, and I learned what it meant to be complicit. The next 5 days passed in a blur of forced marches and fitful rest. They avoided villages where possible, skirting settlements where Aurelion agents might have established watchposts. When they had to enter populated areas for supplies, they moved quickly, spoke little, paid in coin that raised no questions. The war between Silvershore and Dragon's Bend had reached a fever pitch. Every tavern buzzed with rumours of troop movements, of battles won and lost, of villages burned as collateral damage in the great powers' clash. The mortal conflict created useful cover. 2 more armed travellers drew little attention in a world where everyone seemed to be fleeing something or marching toward it. But the physical journey was the easy part. Edrin's internal landscape had become a battlefield of a different sort. The 21 souls, unified in their grief over Mira's capture, had begun organising themselves in ways I'd never witnessed in a soul weapon bearer. On the 4th day after the battle, Marcus noticed it first. They'd stopped to refill water skins at a stream when he saw Edrin kneeling by the water's edge, lips moving silently. Edrin. Marcus's hand went to his sword out of habit, ready for whatever possession or madness might be manifesting. Edrin looked up, and his eyes were clear, not the glazed look of someone losing themselves to the voices, but the focused expression of someone deep in conversation. "I'm asking them," Edrin said, "all 21 of them, what they think we should do about Mira." Marcus blinked. "And they're responding?" "Not just responding, debating." A ghost of a smile crossed Edrin's face, the first since the capture. "Rawn wants to storm the Hall of Accordance immediately with maximum violence. The Harvesters think we should gather intelligence first, map the facility, identify weaknesses. Ma is advocating for a diplomatic approach, though I'm not sure how you diplomacy your way into rescuing someone from divine imprisonment. The Dreamwalker has some idea about entering their communal dream space and extracting her that way." He paused, listening to voices only he could hear. They're treating this like a council, taking turns, making arguments, actually listening to each other instead of just screaming to be heard. This was extraordinary. I leaned forward in my observation, fascinated despite myself. The third way that Edrin had discovered at Cothac's throne, voluntary cooperation among the souls, had survived the trauma of Mira's capture. More than survived. It had evolved. Grief hadn't broken the harmony. It had strengthened it, given it purpose. "What did you decide?" Marcus asked carefully. Majority vote was to continue to Ironfast. Edrin stood, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Get the hammer. Build our strength. Plan properly rather than acting from emotion." He met Marcus's eyes. "Your argument convinced them, not just me. They respect tactical thinking, even when they hate the conclusion." "And the minority?" "Rawn and 2 of the bandits want blood now, but they agreed to the majority decision." Edrin's expression hardened. "They're not happy about it. None of us are. But they understand that what we want and what's possible aren't always the same thing." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A sound rough with disbelief. "You realize what you just described, don't you?" "What?" "Democracy." Marcus's laugh turned slightly bitter. "You've built a functioning democracy inside your own skull. 21 souls with equal say, settling disagreements through debate and voting, rather than force or volume, or who can scream the loudest." The concept was so absurd that Edrin almost laughed too. Almost. But the weight of Mira's absence crushed any humour before it could form. "Mira would have found that interesting," he said quietly. "Then we'll tell her about it." Marcus's hand came down on Edrin's shoulder again, that gesture of solidarity that had become familiar between them. "When we get her back. Not if, When? When? Edrin echoed. Inside him, 21 voices whispered their agreement in perfect unison, a chorus of the dead, unified by love for the living. The incident established a pattern. Each day, Edrin would set aside time to consult the souls, not commanding them, not bargaining with them, but actually asking their opinions and weighing their input. It slowed them down slightly. Marcus grumbled about losing a half hour each evening to parliamentary procedure in your head. But it kept the harmony intact. More than that, it kept Edrin intact. The soul's perspectives, their debates, their various forms of wisdom and foolishness, all of it helped him process grief that might otherwise have broken him. On the 6th day, they encountered refugees fleeing north from a border skirmish. Families with everything they owned packed onto carts, children crying, livestock driven ahead in confused herds. The war had come to someone else's village, and now they ran. Marcus wanted to skirt around them, avoid the attention. But Edrin stopped. "They're in danger," he said. "They're not our concern. They're people." Edrin looked at the stream of refugees, and I saw something in his expression, a reflection of Oakhaven, perhaps, of his own flight from burning homes and murdered loved ones. We can help. We're on a timeline. 1 hour, maybe less. Edrin was already moving towards the refugees. There's a village 3 miles east that the war hasn't reached yet. They could shelter there instead of wandering north into nothing. It took 40 minutes. Edrin spoke to the refugees' leaders, gave them directions, even helped repair a broken cart wheel using techniques Brand had taught him. The souls within him contributed. Halvan Mar's farming knowledge helped identify which livestock were sick and should be left behind. One of the bandits knew the terrain and suggested safe routes. When they resumed their journey, Marcus was quiet for a long time. "That was stupid," he said finally. "Every minute we waste is a minute Mira suffers." "I know, but it was also—" "Right," Marcus's voice softened. "She would have stopped too, would have helped them." "I know that too." Edrin touched Sorrow's edge at his hip. The sword had been strangely quiet during the encounter, as if even it recognized some moments weren't about violence. If we become monsters to save her, we lose what made her worth saving. It was perhaps the most mature thing I'd heard Edrin say. The boy who'd fled Oakhaven in terror and grief was becoming someone else. Not harder exactly, but more purposeful, more certain of who he wanted to be. On the 7th day, they passed through a village that had been touched by divine forces, not destroyed. The Aurelion Accord didn't destroy, but cleansed. Every building stood intact, every street swept clean, but the people moved like sleepwalkers, their eyes glazed with contentment that looked like death, wearing a smile. "Harmony enforcement," Marcus muttered as they passed through without stopping. The Accord's solution to dissent. Make everyone so content they can't imagine questioning anything. Edrin felt the 21 souls recoil in horror. They'd all died with their minds intact, their will their own to the very end. This was worse than death. This was erasure disguised as peace. "Is this what they'll do to Mira?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, Edrin woke from a nightmare where Mira smiled at him with empty eyes, singing hymns to Aurelion's glory, while everything she'd been, her wit, her wisdom, her fierce defiance, was systematically erased. The Dreamwalker spoke up from within. "I can still feel her. She's fighting them, but she's weakening." "How long does she have?" Edrin whispered into the darkness. "Days, not weeks. Whatever you're going to do, It needs to happen soon. 6. On the 8th day, Nethrix made his move. They'd made camp in a hollow between 3 hills, hidden from casual observation, but still within sight of the main road to Ironfast. Marcus was attempting to start a fire with damp wood while Edrin kept watch, sorrow's edge resting across his knees. The sword had been strangely quiet since Mira's capture. Oh, it still pulsed with hunger, still whispered suggestions about consuming more souls to gain more power. But there was a different quality to its communications now. Almost cautious. It knew. Somehow the weapon understood that it had come dangerously close to losing its vessel entirely. Edrin's grief had nearly broken their connection, nearly driven him to either surrender to the 7th Choir or to absolute recklessness that would have ended in death. The sword was learning restraint. Another impossibility in a journey full of them. The shadow that fell across their camp was no surprise. I'd felt Nethrix's attention turning toward them for hours, the Varkul Lord's interest sharpening as he recognized opportunity in Edrin's loss. "Peace," Nethrix said, his form coalescing from smoke and twilight. "I come not as enemy, but as, shall we say, a concerned observer." Marcus was on his feet instantly, blade drawn. But Edrin just looked at the demon lord with tired eyes. "What do you want, Nethrix?" "To offer what I have always offered." Nethrix's form solidified into something approximating human. Handsome features, expensive clothing, the appearance of civilization over chaos. Help in your time of greatest need. "We don't need your help," Marcus growled. "Don't you?" Nethrix's smile was gentle, understanding, perfectly calibrated to wound. "Your mentor has been taken, your guide, your moral compass, your link to a world that still makes sense. The Aurelion Accord has her now, and you know what they'll do to her, what they're probably already doing." He let the words hang in the air, poison slowly spreading through certainty, truth binding, memory extraction, divine harmonization. Nethrix spoke each word like a prayer inverted. "They'll strip everything from her mind, not just information about you, but her entire identity. Every secret she kept, every moment of doubt she harbored, every private thought that made her herself. They'll leave her a hollow shell, nothing but obedient flesh, singing hymns to Aurelion's glory." Edrin's hands tightened on sorrow's edge. Inside him, the 21 souls stirred with rage. They knew Nethrix spoke truth, at least about the Aurelion's methods. Several of them had witnessed similar cleansings in their mortal lives. "I can help you save her," Nethrix continued, his voice honey-smooth. "The armor I once offered, it's still available. More than that, I've improved it, refined it for your specific needs." He gestured, and something materialized from shadow. The armor had changed since Edrin last saw it. Still darkness, given form, but now it carried traces of red like sorrow's edge's gem. As if the weapon and the armor were designed to work together, 2 parts of a singular whole. "Put it on, and you'll have the strength to march into the Hall of Accordance itself. You and your 21 companions against the entire 7th Choir. And you would win. I guarantee it." "At what cost?" Edrin's voice was hollow. "The same cost as always. Your service, your allegiance, your eventual transformation into something greater than mere mortal." Nethrix spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. "But Edrin, consider what you're already becoming. You carry 21 souls. You've achieved harmony that shouldn't exist. You're already something more than human. Why not embrace that evolution fully?" Because he'd lose himself, Marcus said flatly. That's what your help always costs. Identity, choice, everything that makes someone who they are. Would you? Nethrix turned to Edrin, ignoring Marcus entirely. Or would you finally become fully who you were always meant to be? The blacksmith's son who wields both creation and destruction. The boy who bridges the gap between mortality and divinity. The one who proves that divine law is just another form of tyranny. He took a step closer, and I felt the full weight of his attention focused like a blade on Edrin's wavering will. I'll even sweeten the offer. Wear the armour, save Mira, and afterward, if you still want to remove it, I'll show you how. No tricks, no hidden costs, just a temporary alliance to rescue someone you both love. It was a lie, of course. Nethrix's armour was not something that could be simply removed. It bonded to the wearer's soul, became part of them, changed them in ways that couldn't be undone. But it was a seductive lie, wrapped in just enough truth to be tempting. I watched Edrin's face, saw the war playing out behind his eyes. The 21 souls were arguing again, some advocating for acceptance, others for rejection. But this time, there was no clear majority. The question was too personal, too immediate, too wrapped up in emotions that defied logical analysis. Rawn, take it. Power is power. We can always find a way to remove it later. Halvan Ma. She wouldn't want you to become this. Honour her by staying true to what she taught. The harvesters. Probability analysis insufficient. Both options carry unacceptable risk. The Dreamwalker. The armour would change you in ways that can't be predicted. But so would her death. 10 voices for acceptance, 10 against. And one, Edrin himself, caught in the middle. No, he said finally. Nethrix's expression flickered. Surprise. Then calculation. No. And not yet. Edrin stood, meeting the Demon Lord's eyes directly. The 21 souls had reached consensus after all, just not through voting. They'd all decided that the choice belonged to Edrin alone, and they would abide by whatever he decided. If I come to save Mira, when I come to save her, it won't be as your servant. It'll be as myself. However incomplete, however broken, however insufficient that self might be. He lifted Sorrow's edge, and the blade sang with 21 voices in unison. She taught me that I don't have to choose between control and chaos, that there's a third way built on respect and cooperation. If I abandon that now, if I take the easy path you're offering, then everything she sacrificed herself for becomes meaningless. Meaning, Nethrix said slowly, is what mortals tell themselves to justify their limitations. Maybe. Edrin's smile was bitter but genuine. But it's all we have, and I'd rather fail as myself than succeed as your puppet. For a long moment, Nethrix simply stared. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not the cruel laughter I'd heard from him before, when mortals danced to his designs, but something that almost sounded genuine. You continue to surprise me, Edrin of Oakhaven. Very well, I'll withdraw my offer, for now. But know that it remains open. When you fail, not if, but when. Come find me. I'll be waiting with armour and answers and all the power you need to burn the world down to save one person you love. He dissolved back into shadow, leaving only whispered words that hung in the air like smoke. 6 days to Ironfast. Less than a week until the hammer is ready. I wonder if Mira's mind will still be intact by then. I wonder if you'll still have the luxury of noble refusal when you hear her screaming in your dreams. Then he was gone. Marcus sheathed his sword slowly. That was brave. Probably stupid, but brave. It was the only choice. Edrin sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The 21 agreed. Even the ones who wanted to accept. We've built something here. He tapped his temple. Something that shouldn't exist according to both the Aurelion and the Varkul. Something that proves their entire cosmology is built on lies. He looked at Marcus. If we're going to change anything, if we're going to save Mira without becoming what Nethrix wants or what Aurelion fears, we have to stay true to that. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And if the hammer isn't enough, Marcus asked quietly. If we get to Iron fast and Bran's weapon doesn't give us the power we need? Then we'll find another way. Edrin's jaw set with determination. The third way worked once. It'll work again. It has to. In the Hall of Accordance, I felt Aurelion's attention shift. She'd been monitoring the exchange through me, watching to see if Edrin would break, if Nethrix would succeed where her own forces had failed. But the boy had held firm, had chosen the harder path, had proven, yet again, that he was something neither side had anticipated. I wondered how long it would take her to realize that her own methods, imprisonment, interrogation, divine judgment, were only making him stronger. That every time she pushed, he found new ways to resist. That faith built on fear was no match for purpose built on love. But Aurelion had never been good at learning from her mistakes. None of us had. That was the fundamental flaw in divine nature. We were too old, too certain, too convinced of our own righteousness to adapt. Mortals, for all their brevity, had one advantage we lacked. They knew how to change. The final 3 days to Iron Fast passed in mounting tension. Every step brought them closer to Bran's hammer, and closer to whatever confrontation awaited them. The roads grew more travelled as they approached the city, more refugees and merchants and soldiers moving in the complicated dance of commerce and war. Edrin spent each evening consulting with the 21 souls, refining their rescue plans, debating tactics and approaches. The democracy of voices had become remarkably efficient. They'd developed procedures. One soul would present a proposal, others would critique it, they'd refine it through debate, then vote. It still took time, but less than it had initially. Marcus watched these proceedings with a mix of fascination and discomfort. His own 43 sorrows had started taking notes, developing their own primitive form of organisation. He wasn't ready to call it democracy, not yet, but the seeds were there. On the 10th day, they crested a hill and saw Iron Fast in the distance. The city was built into the side of a mountain, smoke rising from 1,000 forges even at this distance. It was a place of creation, of industry, of mortal hands shaping metal and stone into tools and weapons and art. The sound of hammers on anvils carried on the wind, a rhythm as old as civilization itself. For Edrin, seeing it must have been like looking at a dream of what Oakhaven might have become if Nethrix hadn't destroyed it. "It's beautiful," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice, recognition perhaps, or maybe longing for the life he'd lost, the life where the loudest sounds were hammer strikes and the worst smell was hot metal and sweat. "It's a trap," Marcus countered. "They know we're coming. They've had 11 days to prepare since taking Mira. That city will be crawling with Aurelion agents." "I know." Edrin's hand rested on sorrow's edge, and I felt the 21 souls within him stirring, not with fear, but with anticipation. They'd spent nearly 2 weeks unified in purpose, building towards this moment. But the hammers there? My father's last gift? The only thing that might balance what I've become. He looked at Marcus. You don't have to come with me. This next part, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Shut up, Marcus said without heat. Mira saved me when I was nothing but a broken weapon singing songs of sorrow. The least I can do is help save her. Besides, a ghost of a smile. Someone needs to keep you from doing something stupidly heroic. Too late for that, Edrin replied. I'm fairly sure everything I've done since Oakhaven qualifies as stupidly heroic. True, but you're getting better at the stupid part. Marcus started down the hill. Come on, we've got a hammer to collect and a rescue to plan. They descended toward Ironfast as the sun began its downward arc, two figures approaching a city that waited for them with eyes both mortal and divine. I followed, no longer bound only by duty, but by something more complicated. Edrin had shown me that the rules I'd served weren't laws of nature, but choices made by beings who claimed authority without earning it. Mira was suffering because she'd questioned those rules. 21 souls had found peace because Edrin refused to accept the binary the gods offered. And I was tired of merely observing while the world burned according to divine will. The crisis I'd felt building for weeks finally crystallized into decision. When the time came, and it would come soon, I would intervene. Not as divine observer, but as participant, not according to the Accord's restrictions, but according to my own conscience. I didn't know if it would be enough. I didn't know if any of us would survive what was coming. But I knew that remaining silent, remaining passive, would make me complicit in every cruelty that followed. And that, finally, was a line I could not cross. Two figures entered Ironfast as the sun painted the mountain gold. One carried a sword that sang with 21 voices. The other carried grief that weighed as much as 43 souls. Together they walked toward either salvation or damnation. I suspected they would find both.
The story continues, as all stories must. Find the next chapter at Codex 11. Subscribe, lest the Forge's call go unheard. The Forge is patient, but it does not wait forever.